Okay, we're hiking part of the Nipmuck Trail here, May in Connecticut. Very, very beautiful. The leaves are all starting to come out and blossom. The weather's nice. Of course, this is coronavirus, COVID time, so we have the woods to ourselves on a Monday. As you can see behind me, a lot of the trails here, the Blue Blaze trails, will follow ancient roads, really, old logging roads or foresting roads or maybe old farming roads from back in the day. You can see over here some of the New England stone walls. We'll see a lot of these as we go around today. This is part of the Nipmuck Trail. Runs all the way up to the Massachusetts state line. We did part of it the other day when we were up at Bigelow Pond and followed a portion of it along Breakneck Pond with some wonderful views there as well. There's no waterfront views that I'm aware of on this trail. It will connect into Bigelow Hollow up north, and it does also connect and branch to the Nostoc Trail, which we hiked a couple of days ago, or at least a portion of it, over in the Goodwin State Forest. So we'll check back later and share some of the highlights of this hike. Yeah, take a look at all the rocks in the path here, but this is very normal throughout New England. The soil and the earth in this part of the country full of granite, full of rocks like this. But what they did hundreds of years ago when the European settlers came, they would clear the fields so that they could grow their crops. They pulled all these rocks out, and maybe in the distance there you can see way back in the forest there the remnants of an old colonial wall. It's kind of weird to find that out in the forest, and you see that a lot. They marked the boundaries of where either they penned in their livestock or they marked off their boundaries of their field for growing crops. It's an interesting old oak. Looks like it had some disease. Hardy ancient one there. It's covered up all those little tree tumors, and it just kept on growing. The tree's probably hundreds of years old. But yeah, all these rocks, 300-400 years ago were used to build all the stone walls that you see all around New England. Well, here's an interesting spot. Clearly something from, back in the early settler days. Maybe if you can get here behind me, get a view down in here, back here, the remains of an old cellar, somebody's cellar, part of a chimney back here. So this was a farmhouse or something. There's a retaining wall back here as well. And then, yeah, you can see the wall right here above my shoulder. And of course also here it looks like somebody was doing some logging at some time, but they left their wood because it's all mossy and grown over. So we'll continue on. We'll check with you later. We're in the middle of these stone ruins here that I just showed you up, standing from up here. Decided to explore down in here a little bit. It looks like it was like a basement or something, but it's kind of interesting because it looks like we'll get down into here, shine into here. It looks like more of the middle of either a well or a kiln of some sort. Kind of reach down in there. It's interesting. Need to be careful reaching into holes like this because sometimes we do have copperheads and snakes up around here, although this is the spring. This isn't their breeding season. It's not like September and October, or in the woods you need to watch out for copperheads because that's when the eggs hatch and they breed their young. So we'll have to look up, see what this was. So let's continue down the trail. Yeah, back behind me we're looking at what I thought was a chimney to a house, because we saw sort of what I thought were foundation basements and all that. But it just occurred to me where we started and park the car. The car park is up the end of a road called Iron Mne Road. So if I had to take a guess, this is probably a smelting furnace, maybe to make coke out of the iron or something like that. Certainly possible. Alright, I'm stopping here because this is another interesting spot, and I'm going to do a 360 around here. You can see the old boundaries, more of the stone walls. Even as we keep going down this path here, this trail, we keep running into these stone walls. So this was very active and settled at one point in time. But the interesting thing that I want to show you here is if you look over my right shoulder, you see the wild grasses and the ground cover growing here in this clearing in between all of these walls. And then also notice the trees. In most parts of the forest, trees will cluster together. And I'll find some and show you later when we come to it. But your clusters of oak and clusters of maple, clusters of birch, clusters of white pine and eastern hemlock. This area was clearly cleared and farmed at one point in time because, and how can we tell? It's because, you know, all of the different kinds of trees that are commingled here. I mean, this is so interesting to see this. You know, the forest is growing back, and I guess at some point in time, you know, we'll have a dominant species here because there's low forest and high forest trees, and eventually the oak and the old white pines will crowd out, you know, the birch and then the smaller trees that enjoy and thrive in the lower light of the forest. I love it when I find clusters like this. There's a couple of very tall and old white pine behind me, but as I mentioned before, the trees cluster together, and I really believe there's parents and there's children. So here you have the parents, and if you follow around behind me over my shoulder, you see the cluster of all of the children, all of the smaller white pines. Now eventually the parents will reach the end of their days and they'll fall down. Either they'll get disease, or the birds or insects will get to them, or a storm will come along and take them down, and then they'll fall into the forest here and turn to humus and nourish the rest of the woodland and continue to nourish the children. Alright, I'm standing in the middle of a place called Pixie Falls, and actually I'm in the middle of the stream here. If this was after a rain, or if this was in April when the snows were melting, there's no way I'd be standing here. I'd be knee deep in water. But you can hear it behind me. You can see it flowing down the rocks. There's so many of these all over Connecticut. When you hike through the woods, you cross many of these streams. This is a particularly nice one because this falls, cascades down a couple of levels. It's really nice. And now I'm going to turn around from the falls here a little bit and show you a little bit behind me. If you look up over my right shoulder here, we haven't encountered these on this trip yet. These are eastern hemlock, also called eastern hemlock spruce. They're native to Connecticut. They're very beautiful. They tend to grow in clusters. They can grow very tall, and in fact, they're a patient species. They'll grow in the shade for a while. I have several at my yard back home that are decades old, and they're sort of in the shade of oaks. But then, as the older trees die off and go on and fall down, then they'll take advantage and they'll grow very, very tall at that point. So this is a very young grove, although I think we have a very, very big one up here, you can see. But I'm sure we'll see more of these today. Now behind me is a very old and ancient eastern hemlock. You can see she's made her home with her roots straddling all these granite boulders here. But I'm going to move the camera a little bit and just go up her trunk and just see how far she reaches out. Amazingly beautiful tree. And even more amazing is how she's grown like this with her roots hugging the rocks like that. Very interesting. And behind me, over my shoulder, back here, I'm surprised we haven't come into this before. There's a lot of it that you run into out in the woods. This is mountain laurel. I guess within the next month it'll bloom with some very pretty white flowers. But the interesting thing I want to show you about this is everywhere that I've gone out here, in fact even with the plants, some plants that I have at home, I'll start to show you, it's very susceptible to a fungus. If you see the brown all over the leaves, it doesn't seem to hinder the growth. It seems to be a symbiotic relationship between the fungus and the plant, but it's very prevalent throughout the state. The only exception that I have seen to this is in the very far north, near the Massachusetts border, up around Bigelow. I've run through patches of this that are just pristine, that don't have this fungus, and I don't know, I'm not a botanist, and I don't know the reason for it. Maybe it's the climate, maybe it's somewhat cooler up there. But just thought this would be an interesting stop to share the little grove of mountain laurel and tell a story about this native plant here in Connecticut. Well, as you can see behind me, we are entering a part of the Nipmuck Trail that's over 400 years old, as the sign says. And this was part of the original Connecticut path. So what does this mean? This means that when the early European settlers who settled up in Massachusetts area around Boston and Plymouth first came to the shores, when they first settled here, when the settlers started to move inland to get more farmland, unfortunately they took it from the native peoples, but they migrated over a path. And this path, small little path you see behind me, is part of that 400-year-old footpath and migration trail from when the white settlers first started to move into the into the continent of what would become the United States. Yeah, as you can see behind me, we just headed down this path. You see the old road. We're hiking on what's been a footpath through these parts, or maybe even a wagon or a horse path for over 400 years. It's kind of sad to think about it, because all of this land was owned. It was lived on by native peoples, and the white settlers came and took it, and there's no trace of them here. So it's very sobering, when we're out and enjoying everything that we have in the United States, to realize some of the many injustices that happened along the way. But we're walking on 400 years of history here. Well, just when you think you have the forest to yourself, occasionally on all of the hiking trails you come across clearings where people have built a bench out of a fallen tree. That old pine tree you see way back up here. Looks like a cyclone came through here at one time, and just a small cyclone, and just touched down and just sheared that off. But they've made a few benches out of it, built a nice little fire pit behind me as well. Kind of a nice little place to come out and camp. Either that or spend an evening roasting marshmallows over the campfire. Well, you can see the blue marking on the tree behind me. We're hiking, again, the Nipmuck Trail, or at least a portion of it, and it's part of the Blue Blaze Connecticut trails. All of the Blue Blaze trails in Connecticut are maintained by volunteers, as you can see back over my shoulder right here. Little bridge that's kind of built out here in the middle of the forest to make it easy to get across this very muddy and wet area of wetland behind me. Other than that, we'd be ankle deep in mud to follow this trail. But the trails are all maintained by volunteers with the Connecticut Forest and Park Association. So, you know, if you live in Connecticut and you hike these trails, you should be a member and support the organization. And then also, if you come here to visit and plan on hiking several of these trails, you should become a member as well to support the trails and the maintenance of them, because if it wasn't for the volunteers, it'd be very difficult to maintain these many trails throughout the state of Connecticut. So I'm just a few steps away on the footbridge that's going over this wet area. It's a nice little stream, small river that runs, and I'm going to do a 360 all the way around so that you can get a good view. You can see part of the bridge built behind me right here, again maintained by volunteers with the Connecticut Forest and Park Association. But a nice scenic spot and a very convenient crossing out here along the Nipmuck Trail. Now I'm going to wade into the woods a little bit here, because this is an interesting stone wall that I came across. It's right along the trail. Remember, this is a 400-year-old, or at least a portion of it, footpath where the white settlers started to migrate inland. All the crunching as I'm walking through brush to get to this. But I can't help but wonder what this is. It doesn't really look to me like it was anything agricultural. It almost looks like it was a way station of sorts, or a stopping place for the settlers that were all migrating inland here. Maybe stopped for the night. Maybe a place to tie up their horses. Earlier I mentioned that the trees tend to cluster in neighborhoods, so I'm going to do a 360 right where I'm at right now. There's a cluster of very old white pines. You can see how tall they are right up here, but this whole little cluster is just all very old white pines. So we're in the pine neighborhood. All right, behind me you can see we're at an intersection. This is not uncommon, but I wouldn't say it's too frequent you run into this on the Blue Blaze Trail, but we hit the intersection of the Nipmuck and the Notchog Trail. It's starting to rain, and looks like we're going to get some thunder showers, so I'm not going to continue to follow the Nipmuck today. As you can see, it's about 14 and a half miles up to the Massachusetts border. It'd be a nice little hike. In fact, we've done most of that. Very enjoyable. Goes through nice forest and very interesting trees and streams and things like that. But we're going to follow the Notchog for a little bit if we don't get too wet. And the reason I'm going to head down that way, we did that 2 days ago, and it was very disappointing. Went through an area where they were doing a lot of harvesting in the wood, and I guess people are going to differ, and we'll get into holy wars on harvesting in the woods. But it almost looked like a war zone. So the portions that I hiked down near the Goodwin Forest were very disappointing. So we'll follow this for a little while. If we don't get too wet, we may have to put the rain gear on. But I'd like to have a good impression of the Notchog to replace the bad memories of a few days ago. A short while back we stopped to take a look at the mountain laurel and all of the fungus that's on it. But if you take a look at what we have growing here, maybe just a few spots or some insects ate it. It's all clear and clean. In fact, most of it here is. And we're just a little further north than we were. I don't know why that is. I'll have to go research that a little bit, but I found it surprising, something that I've noticed, that a little bit in the northern part of the state that we don't have the fungus on the mountain laurel. You see behind me, right over my shoulder here, a no trespassing sign. Interesting fact about many of the Connecticut trails. Much of them go through state forest and municipal land, but all of them will sooner or later abut private property. And some owners are more friendly than others. In fact, some owners grant a right-of-way for hikers to go across the trail. Others, put up signs like this, particularly in hunting season, because they don't want any hunting on private land. But for the most part, unless it's posted otherwise, the hunting is allowed in Connecticut State Forest, which is an interesting point. If you're hiking during hunting season, it's very important to wear some type of bright orange so that you don't have accidents with hunters and firearms out in the woods. As you can see, I got the rain gear on. We had a slight change of plans. Instead of Nutchog, I continued up to Nipmuck. We're going to head up to where it crosses a road and end today's hike here and turn back. The rain seems to have stopped for now, but I heard some thunder a short while back and thought it best not to spend too long in the woods this afternoon. Interesting ruin behind me. As you can see, a bit of a stone wall, and from the looks of it, looks like the foundation of what was a cellar of a structure. Maybe that pile of rocks right back here perhaps is was a chimney, a fireplace of sorts. Further over here, back here, you can see part of what was the foundation wall to the basement. Don't know what this once was. Maybe somebody's home. You find these all over. Here's another stone wall from the days of early settlers. These were all built, I'd say probably at least 300 years ago. I always wanted to come up here at some point in time with a metal detector and see what memories we could find. All right, we're going to turn around here because the weather still looks threatening. I was able to take the rain jacket off. It's sprinkling a little bit, but that's no bother. We've reached the roadway here. Very common. Many of these blue blaze trails will go off, some 40, 50 miles. You can go quite a ways on them. But almost always they're going to cross a road. They're also going to, sometimes there'll be a road walk for a portion of them. I'm not a big fan of those, but I understand why. It's create a contiguous trail. Okay, so we've got about two miles from back behind me. If we were to see the blue blazes back here, if we were to continue on there, I'd say it's maybe about another 12, 13 miles to the Massachusetts border. I want to show you another warning, okay? Any of you that follow Connecticut, that we have a problem with ticks, and maybe you can read the sign back behind me. This is a tick surveillance area. The deer tick is very common in this area. It's a very small tick too. When it gets on you, it's very difficult to get off, unlike some of the larger ticks. So you always have to check yourself whenever you come into the woods, or even if you're out here with your pets and things like that. Like even myself, I wear light pants because that way I can see them much more easily than if I wear dark pants, and then sometimes I don't find them until they like to attach under your arm or back in the crease behind your knee and things like that, and if they're really nasty, they'll get up on your neck or something like that. So always be mindful of ticks in the woods in Connecticut, where repellent with DEET helps a little bit, but check yourself, check your animals anytime after a trip from the woods. So we're going to turn around this point. This is the way we've come. Again, this has been the Nipmuck Trail. We've taken about 2 miles. It'll be about another 2 miles on the way back. Good 4 mile in and out. It's kind of a nice couple hours. And again, this is Ted Lloyd. Thank you for joining me. Hope you'll join me on another excursion somewhere not local to where I'm at, or one of these. I mean, that you can follow me online or through Visionquest Excursions or Ancient Ireland Tourism. Well, we're back at the car park. That was a nice, roughly 4.5 miles, if I were to take a guess at it. That was Nipmuck Trail from Iron Mne Road to Eastford Road. Again, I'm Ted, Visionquest Excursions, and I hope you enjoyed hiking with me today.